Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. We will be starting in 2 minutes. We are giving another 2 minutes for other colleagues that will be joining this webinar. So we'll be starting at 5 minutes past. So please bear with us and welcome again to the 6th webinar series of It's Not Your Fault. Good afternoon, and thank you again for being patient with us. Welcome to SIHA's 6th webinar in the It's Not Your Fault campaign series. And today's webinar is titled From the Margins to the Forefront, Elevating Women's Roles in Decision Making and Peacebuilding Processes. My name is Lorraine, and I'm honored to be your moderator today. We gather at a critical moment, and when we look across the Horn of Africa and beyond, women are sustaining communities, mediating disputes, safeguarding rebuilding trust, but too often remain outside the rooms and around us. We see that where peace and security processes do not involve women, they are weaker and they are not long lasting. Globally, and in the last 30 years, women have only made up 13% of negotiators in major peace processes. And just coming to Africa more broadly, women's representation in national parliament sits at around 26% as of 2024, meaning that out of every 4 parliamentary seats that are held, out of every 3 parliamentary seats, 1 is of a woman or held by a woman. And this is very similar to the recent Africa Gender Index, where we see that on average 50% of equality is across economic, social, and public representation areas. So it just means we are not even halfway when we look at the average statistics. So this data shows the scale of the challenge, but it also highlights an opportunity. And today's session asks the practical question: how do we move women from informal influence to formal power safely and for impact? So today we are joined by 4 amazing speakers, and it's my honor to introduce the 4 speakers. Our first speaker is Hala Al-Karib, who's a Sudanese and African feminist activist, community organizer, and research practitioner. She has over 2 decades of experience across Sudan, South Sudan, Eastern Africa, and the Horn of Africa, and her work centers on empowering grassroots women and local communities to take ownership of their governance and development processes. And she currently serves as SIHA's regional director. Our second panelist is Justice Meza, and she is a trailblazing Ethiopian jurist and feminist leader who served as Ethiopia's first female Chief Justice between 2018 and 2023. She's spearheaded comprehensive judicial reforms under her leadership and achieved 30% increase in women judges, established specialized benches for women and children, and introduced a bench book on handling violence against women. She co-founded Ethiopia Women Lawyers Association, and she also co-founded Ethiopia's first women's bank, Enact Bank. She served as agenda advisor on the UN Economic Commission for Africa and has won several awards. Our third speaker is Commissioner Rakeb, and she's a feminist human rights leader with years of experience advancing gender equality, inclusive governance, and social justice across Africa and Asia. And from 2021 to 2025, she served as the Deputy Chief Commissioner and later Acting Chief Commissioner of the Ethiopia Human Rights Commission, where she co-led transformative reforms, secured an A status under the Paris Principles, and under her leadership, achieved parity among commissioners. She's mobilized over 76 CSOs into a coordinated platform for women's leadership and collective advocacy in decision making and peace building. Our final fourth speaker is Sagala Bass, who is a global social practitioner and founder of Adapt Localization Nexus with 10 years plus of experience across Africa and Middle East, and advances decolonial and gender responsive practice across the HDP Nexus. She works and partners with women's rights organizations, youth networks to shift power to local actors while designing locally led strategies that connect crisis response to recovery and peace building. So I would like to warmly welcome our 4 amazing speakers. But before we proceed, I have a few housekeeping notes. For everyone that has joined us, please introduce yourself using the chat box. And for those in the hubs, would like you to introduce yourselves to each other. Would also like to ask everyone that's joining online and in the hubs to keep your microphones muted until you are speaking. And for anyone that has any questions or comments or wants to contribute to this conversation, feel free to do so at any one point. Our speakers will be able to see your questions as they come in and respond to them. But I would also like to say we'll have a Q&A after the panel discussions. And if you'd like to participate in the Q&A, we'll be moving the mic around the rooms. And if you are sending messages and want to address it to a particular panelist, you can do that. But if you'd like everyone to see your contribution, then please direct it to everyone in the chat. We'll have 2 hours for this webinar. Try to accommodate as many questions as possible, but if we are not able to, please write to info@sihanet.org. And we do have translation services that have been provided. So I would like to encourage anyone that would like to join the webinar, either in Arabic, Amharic, or Somali, to do so. And there is a click, you can click on the interpretation. It's a globe symbol at the bottom of your screen, and please find a language that's more accessible to you. We also allow everyone to share content from the presenters. However, to protect confidentiality and safety of participants, we request that you first seek consent and do not share any identifying information like names or photos without explicit consent. This is a safe space, a feminist space, and we encourage open discussion and welcome all and different viewpoints. We request everyone to be respectful in their communication, either with panelists or with participants. And we'll also have an interactive session later on in the webinar with a poll question. So with these ground rules, I think we should start. And I'm going to start with Hala. If you can share with us, this is a space where we want to learn from past WPS interventions. There's been heavy investment, and we know this is WPS month. It's the 1325 anniversary, 25 years since the anniversary came into force. Good to hear from you why so much investment has been made on WPS, but we are not seeing so much structure change. And if you can also speak to how this connects to women's political participation, peace and violence, looking across the region, we see a disconnect between political power and gender justice. And if you can also speak to us about that while drawing on SIHA's experiences, what lessons have we learned? Can we learn? What examples can you share around how women are redefining peace and political participation, especially in contexts affected by conflict? So over to you, Hala.
Thank you so much, Laureen, and it's such an honor to be part of this fantastic group of speakers. Very, very delighted. And also to lend my voice to this important and critical session. The question of women political participation in Africa and in this region has been such a persisting question. And there is a lot of myth and misunderstanding, in my view, around it, around the role that women can play in politics and in political process, what are the foundations of women role, the modalities of engagements, and the agenda and the legitimacy, and then our capacity, the capacity of women to influence change, when it comes to politics and policies in favor of, gender equality, in favor of women, peace and security. And I think it all lies on the fact that, what are we bringing as women into the political space? And what are the basis of our participations? Because we could be represented in multiple platforms. And I'm not here argue against representation. I think representation is critical and important, but the manipulations of gender identity politics by having women present without them having voices and the legitimacy to influence change in favor of other women situation and positions could be extremely counterproductive. We all lived in countries, and we are living in countries. Sometimes we see parliaments that has close to 50% representations of women. But then at the same time, we would see an extremely, discriminatory policy and politics that tends to undermine women and to disregard their priorities and their needs. So this is this is the very important questions that we should ask, is why it's important for women to be part of decision making and to be part of policy and political change and agenda formations. And it's basically because we want to influence shifts, and create a shift in politics and policies in our regions. We want to, and that should be based on our feminist values, based on our commitments to equality. And there are other women who participate in politics and in political spaces based on representing an agenda that does not relate to the agenda that we are advocating for as women organization and as feminist groups. So and they are presence on behalf of on patriarchal institutions and to endorse patriarchy. So despite the fact that they are present, there is no added value when it comes to the agenda of women and the shifts that we are working for policy and for political change. And this is a very important point. I think we need to think about it, that the difference between a real participations on behalf of women and their agenda and what matters and what's important to them, and the politics of representations, to be present as a woman, which is very important, yes, but then at the same time to echo the agenda of patriarchal institution that works against the women's agenda, the rights to equality, the rights to access to resources, and the rights to live free from violence, to influence peace and security, conflict transformations, and so on. And in my view, I think it's very, very important for us in this part of the world, in this particular region, that struggle with conflict, that struggle with polarizations, that struggle with divisive, toxic, patriarchal politics and sexism, an extreme high prevalence of violence against women. It's really important for us to be part of the political spaces. But it's also very critical and important for us to be part of the political spaces based on, a clear agenda, that not only serves the women, but serves our community and contribute to the transformations of our societies into more just and peaceful society. Because as it's proven and as we have been seeing, for decades, the patriarchal structures of the states, the sexist structures of our states, has further contributed to more division and more polarizations of our societies. And I think as women, we have a responsibility, to think more and present an alternative model of governance by insisting, and I know the resistance is going to be quite significant, but I think, what's really important, is to persist and to, to try to come together as much as possible and to legitimize our demands, based on what actually women wants. So when we speak, we don't speak as a single voice, or we don't speak as a woman that's been selected by patriarchal institutions to represent them, but we speak as a reflections of what women want. And within SIHA, we had lengthy conversations about with grassroots women in different parts of the region about their how do they see political change and what does it mean to them, or how do they see peace and what does peace mean to them. And one of the things that I can never forget, an example from South Sudan, when women talked about, the fact that what we are enduring in terms of sexual violence and domestic violence, and violence on the streets, it's not being approached or looked at as part of the political violence, then how can we have a constructive input, in politics if we continue to be violated in our private life, or how if we continue to be violated and intimidated on the streets and inside our home, if domestic violence is a reality, and so on. So it's very, very important, to as we are looking into this issue, and based on the sequence of events, and the cycles of conversations on women political participation, and think about what went wrong and why we were not able to influence change and to create a shift in our politics and policies. And how can we decolonize, the whole concepts of African women, and women from this part of the world capacity to influence change in their community? How can we recall, our own African values, our own indigenous values, and regain our capacity to influence change based on our lived experiences, based on our experiences at the local governance level, based on our experiences at the family level, and also to recall and utilize concepts of intersectionality within the feminist schools, and understands that things are very much connected and integrated. Thank you so much, Laureen, and I look forward to hear the remaining valuable input from the other speakers.
Thank you so much, Hala, for that deeply grounded reflection. And you've reminded us that the gaps in women, peace, and security implementation are not just from a lack of frameworks, but from how power continues to be negotiated and denied in our political spaces. Thank you, Hala. And we will now be hearing from our next speaker, who's Justice Meza, and has been able to embed gender equality and accountability in justice institutions, and also having introduced and set up the first Women's Bank in Ethiopia. Please share with us, during your tenure as Chief Justice, what key reforms you were able to support that effectively institutionalize gender equality within the judiciary. As Hala has said, not every country gets to this point. What were some of your tips and tricks? How can similar approaches be adopted across peace and governance institutions? And also with setting up the specialized benchmark the specialized benches for women and the book on violence against women and girls. If you can talk to us about that, and looking ahead 25 years from today, when we look at the post-1325 agenda, what should we be doing? How can organizations and movements and grassroots leaders navigate some of the dynamics that Hala has just spoken about? So over to you, Justice Meza. You're muted, Justice.
How about
Yes, I
now?
think.
Okay,
Yes.
wonderful,
Now we can
wonderful.
hear you.
Yes. I was just thanking you and SIHA for inviting me to this important forum. And I also like to congratulate SIHA for sustaining this commitment over the last, I guess, 3 decades to be the voice for women of the Horn. This afternoon, I am honestly, personally gratified to join you because women of the Horn are very much in my heart and in my mind. Of course, I have engaged over the decades at the continental level since the adoption of the Solomon Declaration on Gender Equality, the African Women's Protocol, and more recently with the AU's Convention on Violence Against Women and Girls. But I have not specifically engaged with the Horn of Africa and given my respect to the resilience and endurance and creativity of the Horn of Africa women. I would have loved to do more and to engage more, and this hopefully would be um, a door opener for us as well as my office to continue the engagement. The topic you raised, as both of you raised, Laura and Hala, is very, very important, particularly because this year is the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action. We all remember that one of the critical areas of concern for the Beijing Platform of Action is participation of women in decision making. And you remember that Beijing sort of put the target of 30%. The platform calls it critical mass for participation of women in decision making. Laura, thank you. You gave us some data that we're not yet there in terms of representation of women in decision making. Hence, this is unfinished business, and we need to continue to engage, and more so, because of the backlash at the global level, the regional level, and the national level, and we have to continue to really enhance our efforts. You want me to highlight some of my previous activities over several years, and also most recent ones, and I would do that quickly. But there are reports and documentations for those of you who are interested in learning more about my work over the decades. I agree with Hala. Participation and specifically representation of women in decision making do not necessarily translate into result. She used the word adding value. That is a very important point that we need to reflect upon, because the research shows that the result is mixed. On the other hand, we have some good examples, even in Africa. In fact, sometimes even leading the world. The case of Rwanda is one. Participation of women in leadership, 64% in the parliament, and so on. But it's not only about their representation in the parliament, but they have done very well in terms of legislative reform, for example, in the area of inheritance and family relations and making sure that gender equality is monitored in all executive branches and so on, and financial inclusion and so on. So we also have some, in spite of the challenge, we also have some positive results. And the most recent example is again Namibia, when the a lady won the presidency. She made sure that 50% of the cabinet members are women, and so on and so on. But the challenge persists for sure. So in terms of my own experience, I think I am a believer that, women have the right to participate in leadership and decision making because that's their right, because it's a right. This is affirmed in many conventions, regional, global, and national laws, and so on. But not only that, women can also play if the ecosystem is okay, and if they're also courageous and if they're risk takers, they can also play a critical role. On the other hand, women don't always wait for appointment and for decoration. They also create the space, just like we're doing right now. And as you referred to, Laura, most of my career, whether it is establishing the Ethiopian Women Lawyers Association or leading the establishment of a women's bank and so on and so on, I am one of those who sort of create the space and claim, leadership. But also, I have assumed a formal position as president of the Supreme Court, even when I took up that formal responsibility, also partly thanks to my strong background and experience in advocacy for gender equality. I used it very, very well. So just to just highlight some of the achievements, as you already indicated, includes making sure that convincing the Judicial Administration Commission to appoint women in the leadership of the judiciary for the first time in the history of the country, other than myself. Also appointing more women in the judiciary, including at the level of the Supreme Court, establishing 11 benches, women and children benches, to ensure that, the issue of violence against women and gender-related cases get the attention that they deserve and the priority that they deserve. Also related to this, you already mentioned the bench book that we have adopted on violence against women and so on. So when I was appointed, there was no strategy on gender mainstreaming, although government policy requires every government office make sure that gender is mainstreamed in respective workers. So we have done that. And also we have adopted a sexual harassment policy because this is I'm talking about a very big institution, 400 judges and about 3,500 support staff. So these are some of the examples. So when I go back to my advocacy work, activism work as one of the founders of the Ethiopia Women Lawyers Association, also I started off with sort of zero experience in the civil society movement. I, as well as my colleagues, one of them is the panelist today, Rakeb. We took the opportunity to advocate for legislative reform, family law reform, criminal law reform, pension law reform, nationality law reform. And it was unprecedented. And we used research, but the research is very much action-oriented. And we mobilized the public and the parliamentarians to enact the law. We did not stop there. We made sure that we establish a network of legal aid service providers across the country, and we used the law to advocate for the rights of women. After a few years, I also came to realize that economic empowerment is also very important to ensure women's rights, to make sure that women use their rights fully. That's how we established, again, with another group of women entrepreneurs and professionals, the first women's bank, not only in Ethiopia, even in Africa, even in the world. When I talk about the experience of the women's bank, we call it a nut bank. Women are really, really excited. And the bank follows a unique model in the sense that 64% of the equity is owned by women, and financial inclusion is a core policy. We have a specific department called Women Financial Solutions that focuses on mainstreaming, the interest of women and financial inclusion in the work of the bank. As of today, the bank has established 218 branches all over the country. And so the link between legal right and economic right is quite clear. Women can assert their agency, their autonomy, their independence once they're financially capable. So sort of one follows from the other. Finally, I just want to touch on a couple of on one point that Hala mentioned. She mentioned about indigenous knowledge and sort of homegrown leadership approach. And I think it will be very important for all of us to continue to reflect on that. What is a governing ideology? Even when we think about Horn of Africa, what is a guiding principle? What is the ideology? Is a common ideology on which our respective nation states are based, or even if we talk about the region, and what is the cause of the conflict that is affecting women in a very, very negative way. So we need to realize that when we discuss about women in leadership, women in decision making, we are not all on the same page. Some countries have advanced democratically, economically. Other countries in Africa are under dictatorship or even military government, and others are in conflict situations, so on. So this diversity have to be taken into account, and we have to analyze the implication of all this. And finally, I like to give just information. I want to share information about the African Facility for Women in Political Leadership. This is a facility launched by UNDP. They provided the facility with $1 million initial seed funding. I'm sharing this information because I want the Horn of Africa women to participate in opportunities when opportunities like this arise. And let me stop here, and I look forward to engaging in this forum and beyond. And thank you for this opportunity, Laura.
Thank you so much, Justice Meza, for that, for reminding us that institutional change begins with conviction and courage, and your leadership shows what's possible when women don't only enter these institutions, but transform them from within. And I think one thing I take away from what you said is women should never wait to be invited. We claim, create, and take up space. And we should also open doors for other women to walk through. So thank you so much, Justice Meza. I would like to encourage those of us joining the webinar, if you have any questions, comments you'd like to contribute to the conversation, please use the chat box or use the Q&A function, and our panelists, our speakers will respond to you. I think after listening to Justice Meza, it is rightful to listen to Commissioner Rakeb next, because she also opened doors for other women in her tenure as the Deputy Commissioner for the Ethiopia Human Rights Commission. We saw that she was able to deliver parity. So, Commissioner Rakeb, if you can speak to us about some of those institutional hooks that supported inclusion within the institution. What did it take to achieve gender parity in leadership? How can this be sustained? Because as Hala said, whose agenda are the women in leadership fronting? So how do we sustain the women's agenda? And also piggybacking on what Justice Meza has just said, it's the 30th decade. So we want to just learn more and hear from you on what reforms need to be implemented to lock women's decision rights across the Horn of Africa. So over to you, Commissioner Rakeb.
Thank you, Laureen. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the session. So, as Laureen mentioned, I was the Deputy Chief Commissioner for the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, which is considered as one of the oversight bodies until very recently. So today, my presentation will focus on how institutions, such especially oversight bodies, can move beyond symbolic inclusion to real system change. And using the experience of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, I will explore the mechanism, what was referred as institutional hooks, that make inclusion actionable and sustainable. I will also look at how other oversight bodies can enforce accountability, especially in security and justice sector, while protecting women leaders and survivors from backlash and harm. So for those of you who are not aware of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, it's a national human rights institution, which is mandated to promote and protect human rights. And it's an independent institution reporting to the parliament. So like any institutional change, inclusion starts from leadership. We were lucky enough to have a chief commissioner that was a great champion of gender equality and inclusion. And so it was not really difficult to make gender mainstreaming and inclusion a leadership priority rather than just a technical task. And with that, we also brought on board 2 additional commissioners in addition to myself. I have a very ample experience in gender mainstreaming, child friendliness of security and justice systems. But we also brought 2 other commissioners, one who has ample experience in gender mainstreaming, the other in social inclusion, especially disability inclusion, on board, which elevated inclusion to the highest, as a highest priority. And of course, all commissioners were part of the senior leadership team, which meant that inclusion was always on the agenda and had the political weight to drive change. And of course, to drive any kind of institutional change, you need to understand the problem, because you cannot fix a problem that you do not understand. So we adopted a human rights-based approach to the whole issue and conducted a gender and social inclusion audit to identify gaps, limitation, but also our opportunities. And this informed a comprehensive action plan and the guidelines we developed to provide direction to the whole institution. But importantly, we made gender analysis, we embedded it in every stage of our work, from policy and legal analysis to human rights monitoring, investigation, and all our core functions, which ensured that it was not just an afterthought, but a core principle and based on evidence. Another hook is institutional power and structure, because having a plan is not enough. You need the right structure to implement it. So we assigned 2 departments, one for gender mainstreaming, the other one for social inclusion. And they were also had access to top leadership. They were also empowered with the necessary authority and budget to implement their plans. And also the directors of this department were part of the senior leadership. So they were part of the leadership ecosystem, which allowed them to influence decisions and ensured accountability across the institution. Another institutional hook is budgeting, because without budgets, you will not be able to implement your plans. So we did not just fund the 2 departments we assigned for gender mainstreaming and inclusion. We also allocated adequate budget across all departments so that they can address the needs of diverse social groups. This created shared ownership and made inclusion a cross-cutting responsibility. It also allowed departments to tailor their approach based on their specific mandates and the communities they served. As you all know, accountability cannot be possible without data. So we adopted, as I mentioned, a human rights-based approach, which required all departments to report on sex and disability disaggregated data. This was not just for compliance, it was also used to track progress, adjust strategies whenever needed. Data gave us the evidence to hold department accountable and to make informed decisions. It also allowed us to communicate impact to our stakeholders and donors. As Hala mentioned, gender parity in leadership is very critical. So we adopted targeted headhunting to make sure that female representation was achieved. So we had almost 58% female representation at senior level. Wherever in departments, some departments, we found it very difficult to find qualified female candidates. In that circumstances, we recruited junior female employees with potentials and really invested in their development. This created a pipeline of female leaders and addressed structural barriers to advancement. Another hook was the policy ecosystem. So we did not just develop action plan guidelines, but we developed a whole suite of gender sensitive policies and tools, including, as Justice Maza mentioned, an anti-sexual harassment policy, but also we revised our human resource manual so that we create a working environment that is conducive for female employees, including the provision of travel allowance for nannies for female employees who had young children that they cannot leave behind whenever they have to travel for training or meetings outside their residential area. We also established an anonymous and accessible complaint mechanism for those who wanted to report on non-compliance. And this suite of policies and tools were not optional. Every department had to implement them or provide strong justification why they were not able to implement it, but also include a remedial plan to rectify any kind of gaps. This created a culture of accountability and ensured that inclusion was embedded in everyday operation. To prevent inclusion from being sidelined, we made inclusion a standing agenda item in all our quarterly and annual reviews. It was discussed in leadership meetings, in our Council of Commissioners meetings, in all kinds of management meetings. We also committed to conduct in-depth evaluation of all our major policy or guideline documents every 2 to 3 years to assess progress and rectify any kind of gaps. This routine integration ensured that inclusion remained a priority and also was always continuously assessed. And of course, sustainability is very key because inclusion is not a one-off exercise. It is a continuous process. It requires ongoing commitment from the leadership, adequate resource, and institutional integration. And leadership must continuously reinforce these values, and systems must be in place to monitor progress, evaluate impact, and adapt strategies. So inclusion must be embedded in institutional culture and operation. But of course, there are quite a lot of risks to sustainability. One of it is leadership turnover, which may result in loss of momentum or reversal of progress. So to mitigate this, inclusion must be institutionalized in policies and procedures and not just be driven by individuals. Lack of funding can stall initiatives. Securing multi-year budget commitment and integrating it into core budgeting process helps ensure continuity. And as we know now, most of the budget funding from donors is also being reduced. So this is a critical issue that we need to take into account. Institutional resistance may manifest as passive non-compliance, but also as active pushback. So building internal champions and providing regular training can help shift mindset. And also we need a strong accountability mechanism to avoid poor enforcement. So strengthening reporting requirement and linking it to performance evaluation, linking it to inclusion outcome can reinforce compliance. So other oversight bodies such as the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, including audit offices, inspection general, can enforce accountability in different sectors, especially security and justice sector where power imbalances are deeply rooted. They can use tools like audits, human rights monitoring, investigation, public reporting to monitor compliance, but also expose violations. Laureen, can you change the slide, please? Proceed, please. Proceed. I'm really ahead of you. Again. One more. Yes. So an enforcement should also be paired with protection because women leaders and survivors who speak out are often face retaliation and harm. So the oversight bodies should establish confidential reporting channels, legal safeguards, and adopt survivor-led approaches that prioritize safety and dignity. But most importantly, oversight bodies must model the values they promote. This means that they need to practice inclusion internally, ensuring gender parity in leadership, applying gender-sensitive human resource policies, and holding themselves accountable. When oversight institutions embody the principles they enforce, they gain credibility and legitimacy. So they really need to practice what they preach so that they can hold other institutions accountable and be credible in their findings. So finally, as I conclude, I would like to reflect on a few key lessons from this journey. Leadership really matters. Without top-level commitments, inclusion efforts risk being sidelined or symbolic. When leaders own the agenda, change is possible. The second is institutional hooks, such as empowered departments, inclusive budgeting, and mandatory reporting can really convert inclusion into system change. Of course, data is power. Disaggregated data will help us track progress, identify gaps, and re-strategize whenever needed. Representation is really not optional. Achieving gender parity in leadership requires intentional strategies from headhunting to capacity development. Oversight bodies must be equipped to hold institutional accountable while protecting those that really challenge injustice, especially women leaders and survivors. And oversight body must really practice what they preach so that they both internally, but also holding themselves accountable to gender mainstreaming and inclusion. And sustainability, because inclusion is not a one-off exercise, but a continuous process that requires leadership commitment, adequate resourcing, and institutional integration. But with this, I would really like to remind that these are not just reflection, but action point that can really convert inclusion from a principle into a practice, but also ultimately into system change. And these are the journey. I am open for discussion, reflection, and question and answer. But thank you for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner Rakeb. And you've also reminded us that inclusion only becomes meaningful when it's anchored in systems, policy, and accountability. And you're an amazing example of what leadership looks like when it's transformative. And your leadership at the Human Rights Commission is a powerful example of what transformational reform should look like in practice. Thank you for those very practical tips. And with this being a learning space for anyone that is on this webinar, I encourage you to please contribute to this conversation by joining our chat or Q&A function. I'll quickly go to our last speaker, Sagal, who's going to be speaking about the Somali context. And we all understand that this is a clan-based system that limits women's decision-making power. And in your work, share with us what entry points you're using with the structural barriers, the ongoing gender backlash, the reprisals against women who are visible and speak out. And I can remember Honorable Amina, who passed away, who was assassinated on her campaign trail for daring to be brave and stand with other men. So if you can speak to us about all of this, but also some of the successes that you see where women are continuing to navigate and shift decision making, and also drawing on some of your experience with the MENA region and particular Yemen, it would be good to hear from you, Sagal. So over to you.
Thank you so much. Could you kindly also put my presentation slide, if that's okay? And can you also confirm with me my sound? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you perfect.
Yeah, fingers crossed, no technical issues. Thank you. Please let me know if the presentation slide is up because I can't see it from my side. Perfect. Thank you so much. So briefly, just to introduce myself. So my name is Sagal Abbas. Noreen kindly has provided the background. So I work as an independent consultant. I also consider myself as an activist, a youth activist, mainly working on decolonization and localization, especially on the women, peace and security. So over the years, I've worked in international organization, looking at humanitarian response, also looking at the peace building and development side. So most of my focus is working across the nexus, but doing it from an approach that really matters to national and local civil society and local communities. So the hat that I'm wearing today is purely women, peace and security. And I just want to set the tone. It's just to give a brief background on the Somali and Somaliland dynamic, and also linking into Yemen, which I think is really important for us to learn from different environments that have similar sort of experiences on the women, peace and security. So maybe if we can go on to the next slide, if that's okay. So before I go into the challenges and barriers, I think it's also important for us to recognize the visible progress that has been going on in Somalia and Somaliland, but also recognizing the invisible wars that also continue to shape it. So in Somalia, 19 to 20% of parliamentary seats at the federal level are around, of course, are women. But then also when you think about it, we have the 30% quota that hasn't been achieved yet. So just to give you an example, out of 274 members of the lower house, only 52 are women. In the upper house, there's only 14 women out of 54. And if you look at Somaliland, it's even more complicated. Only 3% are women, only a handful. And then also when you look at the decision-making spaces in the socio-economic side, women are also disadvantaged too, because most of them are also concentrated in the informal sector, but also not really contributing to the sort of power decision-making that dictates their life. But I also want to really emphasize that I'm not only just talking about numbers. In fact, I'm actually completely opposite to only focusing on numbers, because when we talk about women's participation, and also the panelists already mentioned, it's about the influence and the sort of role that they have, right? It really isn't just about having a seat in the table, but really looking at what type of concerns that they're putting forward. And I will speak about this later on. So yes, while Somalia women are participating in the informal and formal dynamics, we also have to consider the sort of shocks or barriers that they also have to operate. I really want to emphasize on the patriarchal clan-based society and how this is really impacting the way women can exist in the society. So we are a deeply rooted clan lineage society. So most of the power and influence are passed down through the male parents. So I think about like this, women from birth in a way that we are not really fully belonging to our sort of identity clan, because we follow through the men, so our father and then our husband, right? So technically our positionality from the get-go is in a way, we're reminded that we don't have an influence, right? And also I really want to emphasize that the clan system that we're trying to fight to fit into in terms of the political side is by nature exclusionary, right? So often I find I struggle when we talk about participation, I think about like the system was not designed for us in the first place, right? So while we're fighting to have these seats, we have to keep in mind that there are many women, marginalized people who don't fall into these sort of hierarchical spaces that cannot also influence too. And so again, the system itself is sort of corrupt, right? And I think we need to keep that in mind when we think about women's participation. I also just want to skim through already gender stereotype and patriarchy. Attitudes really impact, again, women's life from the start. I think what's really important, I want to bring a link to research that was done in 2025. So it was about public perception on women's quota in Somalia. So only 12% said that there was no need for a quota in the first place. So most of the sort of response were like, let women compete, right? And a lot of 60% of the respondents said women deserve only 20% of the parliamentary seats. So again, you have to keep in mind the societal dynamics. Economic, a huge barrier, because when women are even competing for a seat, unfortunately, our system is based on money, and even that itself is problematic to buy votes. And then when your clan is fundraising, they're fundraising for the man. They actually believe that the man who's the one that should lead, talk about issues. So there isn't that sort of enthusiasm to fundraise and support a woman to take the seat. So I think that's also really important to mention. And then if you go on to the next slide on the legal and institutional gaps, I think it could be in the other slide, but just to really mention again, while we have these quotas, there is no constitutional binding framework that can really enforce and protect women's political participation. So yes, on paper we have it, but then the question is who is going to push this forward, right? And if you think about the men and the sort of perception of patriarchy and who is considered the leader, we don't have that much allies, right? However, while I say all of this, it's not to say that a lot of progress hasn't been done, right? And I want to also just maybe highlight that if we started to shift our perspective on like women's participation, and we, instead of asking the question, how many women are holding a seat in the office, we ask instead, how many women are shaping decisions, policy, and the processes. So me personally, I'm more interested in not just the seat, but I want to know more about, if we're going to work as a group of women, what are we putting forward to the table? And when you look at the Yemen in sort of dynamics, and I will go into the next slide on that, was that we, as a women, in terms of collectively, they decided that while we have some challenges, if you go into the previous slide, sorry, if you go into the other slide that we just was on, sorry, Levin, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yes, yeah, perfect. So just to summarize on the Yemen dynamic, women are not just saying we need a seat. So I think for the Somalia sort of mobilization, I just want to emphasize that let's start shifting our perspective, and then we start valuing what women are doing already. So we might not have a lot of seats, but here are some examples of women playing a critical role. And so across Somalia and Somaliland, when we look at the role of peace building, and I'm not only just talking about the 90s, even before during the independence movement, women behind the scene have been influencing in the political dynamics. In terms of the peace building, because they are able to fit into the husband's plan and the father's plan, it means that they have sort of many linkages. So in Galmatok and Hishabele, women's peace committees have managed to negotiate ceasefires, also managed to help resolve sort of like disputes, whether it was over land. And also in Puntland, women elders have been able to lead in mediating between displaced and host communities, making sure that there is sort of like a dynamics on like what happens after the violence, right? So in terms of coming to tension and making sure that there's access for humanitarian support. Even when you look at Somaliland, going from the 1990s after the Civil War, women were really instrumental. So when you look at the Hargeisa peace conferences and Borema, so men was the one that was leading in these formal peace negotiations, but women are the ones that were passing information and really making sure that the so-called men on the table would eventually get to a decision, right? So I think it's important that while we acknowledge, yes, it's critical to have a seat on the table, unfortunately, that's where the decision-making is, but we also should recognize that why don't we now look at these informal mechanisms and channels as where the most of the decision-making is taking place. If you look at the next case study, the next slide, if that's okay. I'm sorry if I'm speaking so fast because I really want to make sure I cover most of it. Also, even just advocating for the 30% quota, right? Yes, we may have not achieved it, but just the mobilization itself is significant and huge. So a lot of Somali women MPs, activists, the Ministry of Women have fought to really make this a constitutional reality. So while they have a lot of resistance and challenges, they managed to actually influence the 2024 electoral law, which has now included the quota. So at least there is some step towards something. Also, another thing is that women in Somalia have worked across party lines and clan boundaries. And again, that is such a huge power to really utilize and push forward. So negotiating with the elders, mobilizing the ministries, and also utilizing the media. So that's another thing that I think in terms of the processes and the entry point, there's a lot of great work that's happening on the media side. Also similar on the next slide around the legislation and the advocacy policy reform, just building on to what I just mentioned now, the women's advocacy in Somalia is going beyond the institution. It's driven by human rights defenders. I'm glad I also have a member who's in our workshop today. So when you look at the Somali Women Human Rights Defenders Network, you look at individual activists who are able to really shape the public opinion and accountability. Just some example of this, it was that in 2020, the parliament they did introduce a bill for the sexual intercourse related crimes bill, which basically tried to undo the amazing work that women's advocacy group have been working on over the last decade. And they attempted to use marriage at puberty and remove the definition of rape. So I'm sure everyone here was aware of that. And it was just a huge setback because the idea to make marriage at the age of puberty and to remove the definition of rape itself was again like a slap against all the work that has been going on. However, I'm sure everyone has seen the work that the Somali Women's Organization have been doing, including SIHA, Somali Women's Development Center, Safe Somali Women, alongside, of course, the Ministry of Women. And they created this coalition called No to the Intercourse Bill, released a joint statement, legal analysis, and not only against this, but also mobilizing on the FGM bill as well. And these two mobilization was considered a huge milestone because what they did was connect political participation to the conversation on body autonomy, right? And the campaign did manage to hold the bill and it prevented it from ratifying into the law. I'm sure recently we've seen also more sort of pushback on the protection on women in Somalia. But what I find really amazing and beautiful is the work that women's rights activists in Somalia are doing, utilizing the media, campaigning against it, and also engaging with the traditional elders too. So when the 2020 bill came out, a lot of people went to the religious sheikh and tried to get them on board to say that this is against not only human rights, but Islamically it's incorrect, right? So I'm going to speak slowly because I just realized I'm speaking so fast, so I do apologize. Maybe if you go into the next slide, and I'm going to make sure I talk slow. Yes, so mapping where power and decision making, where does it live? Where does it exist? Hannah made a really good. Yes.
Yeah, also just letting you know that you only have 1 minute, so if you can start to summarize.
Okay, can I go on to the Yemen slide? Move on to the Yemen slide. I just want to quickly reference. If you go into the next slide. Okay, perfect. So why I think Yemen is a perfect example on recognizing the impact of women's influence on the processes, not just about seats, is because while the peace post has been extremely masculine, right? And in fact, in the last peace agreement, only one woman participated. So then they decided, instead of just prioritizing the entire campaign on really the seats, saying let's utilize what we have now and to say, okay, can we advocate for women's justice? So, for example, looking at the security system, how women, female prisoners are being treated, also women whose children were abducted, they also advocated on that, and also making sure that the women peace and security agenda itself is being integrated into the ministry. So a program that I'm working on now, which has been 5 years, we actually supported on the development of a task force. So this task force, all led by like amazing women who coordinate with the civil society, and what they do is pass the information. So a lot of the recommendation doesn't only fall into really the seat, but looking at the economic protection and also looking at how does Yemen post-conflict reconstruction create a society that is not repeating what it was before, but how can we reimagine the society? And I think maybe one key takeaway from this presentation is that we need to now support more on this processes and not distract us in just focusing on a seat. Because if we focus too much on that, we kind of lose sort of the other concerns that we need to start prioritizing. I'm not saying that all women, we need to have one agenda, but if we were able to coordinate ourselves effectively and we were like, okay, we have that one women representation, let's make sure that we're passing information, bring in those brief statement, putting forward gendered recommendation. And I think Somalia needs to look at Yemen and look at what has succeeded so far and incorporate it in their dynamics too. So I hope that summarizes everything so far. I know I went over the time, but I do apologize.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sagal, for bringing the conversation back to the realities of women leading from within fragile systems, and also bringing in your experience around decolonizing aid and centering local voices, and challenging us again to think differently about what inclusive peace building actually means. And also reminding us that women are at the front lines, despite all the barriers, despite the resistance, women have remained vital and should not be excluded. So thank you so much, Sagal. I think we've listened to 4 amazing panelists, and now we would like to make this next session a bit interactive. So we are going to have 5 minutes for a poll question, and you've been listening. Probably this is work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. We need to understand from all of us, if you can either scan the code or use the link that has been shared with you, how do we move women from informal influence to formal power safely and for impact, so that we are not just about representation, we are not counting numbers and checking that box, but it's about quality, it's about meaningful engagement, it's about their influence and making sure they remain safe. So if you can respond to this question, I'll give us 5 minutes maximum to answer this, and then we are going to open up the Q&A. And for anyone that has posted your questions in the chat, thank you for that. One of our speakers might have already responded to you, but if they haven't, they'll have an opportunity to respond to you. So thank you so much. And the poll question is translated in the 3 languages, so feel free to access it in your language of preference. So there is instructions on how to access the poll question. It has been shared in the chat. If you're struggling to access it, you can use a QR code, you can use a link. There are some comments. Thank you for those of you who are sharing comments in the chat box. We see a contribution around the upcoming election on Somalia, and this being a timely conversation. I'm trying to see if we have any questions for any of our panelists. Okay, I don't see specific questions. A lot of what I see are contributions to the conversation. So we'll go around the hubs, asking if there is anyone with any question or comments, but let's start with the questions. And then I will end with Honorable Gada in South Sudan. So we can start from Ethiopia. Maybe let's start there. Ms. Karim, are there any questions in the Ethiopia hub?
Okay. Laura, echo mode. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. That was a very good presentation from all of the panelists. I think my specific question goes to our own Justice Maza. Maybe if there's any plan that Ethiopia is considering to develop responding to take facilitated gender-based violence, because I think the biggest issue we're dealing with now in bringing women into a formal space and political leadership and peace-building governance is that uniquely their safety, their family safety is constantly and repeatedly compromised. So is there any space like that? Can we also contribute if there's any? Can we provide support? Yeah, I think those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. One more question from Ethiopia, and then we'll move to another country.
Okay. Thank you, Laura, for the opportunity. And this question can be for any of the four ladies. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. For me, I'm interested to know, they already shared the experience to what they have done, but I also would like to know what are the challenges maybe they faced in terms of, reaching where they are right now in the leadership position. But is there any challenge that they face during that process, and how are they able to overcome so that it can be more a learning experience for, other women? So it can be just one challenge. It doesn't have to be multiple, but just one challenge they can share, and then the solutions as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ethiopia. I think let's go to two other countries before we come back. If anyone else in Ethiopia has a question, please use the chat function. Let's go to two other countries so that if there are more than two questions for Justice Meza, she can take them or to any of the other panelists. So we'll go to Somalia, Mogadishu. Any questions there? And if you can raise your hand, that would be very helpful with the hubs. Okay, I see no questions from Mogadishu. Hagesa? Okay, I'll come to Camelia. I see your hand is up. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for this very interesting session. And I'm actually in Kassala, where I was really struggling with the network, and it went out several times. But I'm so happy and appreciate the presentations of my colleagues. Maybe some of them I did not get them well because of the network, but I'm really happy about the presentations. And my comments, first of all, my comments is grabbing the first question that was on the screen. And my response to it, or my comments to it, is that women need to continue grabbing the space, because the space is not free, it's not there just for them. They need to continue grabbing the space. And as one of the presenters put it, that we need to also create the space. We may not find the space to grab it, but we have to create it ourselves. And now one of it is this what now that you are doing with SIHA, and I appreciate also the work of SIHA, giving the space for women to come together and talk about their challenges, talk about their opportunities. And I think this is very good that we have learned about what is happening in Somalia, what is happening in Ethiopia, a very good achievements. This is a very good space. Also being knowledgeable. Not every time we are aware of our rights, we are aware of our laws. And I think being knowledgeable and knowing that laws that will protect us is very crucial for us as women. And also being a good negotiator, or having a strong tools or strong means of having dialogue and negotiating on these issues. One of my questions might be how women remain loyal to the women issues, even when they join like these government institutions or political institutions, because some experience have shown that some women, when they get to, they're out of this women civil society space, they also they face a lot of challenges there, which makes them also not to remain loyal to women issues. And I can't blame them, but these are some of the situations that they find there, they face in their new environment or new work. So how can we remain very loyal to women issues, even if we are out of civil society arena? Thank you so much.
Okay, let's first take those questions. So we have a question for Justice Meza, and then I'll ask any of our panelists, probably Hala or Commissioner Rakeb, to respond to the other two questions. So over to you, Justice Meza.
Laureen, we cannot hear you. You're muted.
Oh, yes, thanks. Just Commissioner Rakeb, would you like to take one of the questions?
I can take the one from the Ethiopia Hub on challenges, maybe. So I think one of the issues that most women in leadership position faces, everyone thinks that we're there to fit the shoes of male leaders. So we're either too emotional or we're too harsh. And so people do not understand that we are coming with our own style of leadership. And usually because, women, their emotional intelligence is much more developed, I think we're more adapted to transformative leadership because we can listen much better than men leaders. We can sense, the vibe when we go into the room, etc. So even though everyone wants to understand which style, whether we're trying to replace men leaders or we're too emotional and should adopt more of a motherly kind of attitude, behavior towards leadership, I think we're more adept to transformative leadership, and that we are also there with our own agenda and our own to influence decision-making processes. And I think this also relates to the last question on how we can we try to influence the agenda and bring women's issues to the table, but not just the agenda, but also the decision-making processes. Because as I mentioned in a number of platforms, men go out to drink beer at the end of the day, whereas most women do not do that. And most of the decisions are actually not made in boardrooms or during meetings. Actually, agreement, discussion, and stands are taken prior to coming to the boardroom or to meetings. So we also need to take that into account and make sure that the agenda that we want to table, but also how we influence the decision-making process is really takes into consideration the behavior, the meetings, the groups, the network that men have, because that's also very critical whenever women comes to leadership position, because especially if you want to influence decision-making process, those are the key challenges that most women leaders face. yeah, I think that's the only question that was forwarded to me. I had answered one of the questions on the question and answer chat. I don't think I need to repeat that.
No, thank you. And I would like to encourage those of us who have questions, please use the chat function. Juba, I see your hand is up, and then Wow. Juba, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much. I think it was a very good presentation that we had. And I have really some also comments or questions that related. The first question, I think, it goes to most of the presenters that as we are here talking about our regional meeting that looking into the liberating women role in decision-making and peace-building processes.
Juba,
and we talked about most of the violations and also protections in women issues. Sexual harassment, I've seen very good policies that it has come out. But looking into another angle, that our person with disability, I haven't heard anything about them as far as protection against any violences, whether it is sexual, whether it is and other aspects. So I need you also to look into this case seriously. But also I've seen some from the presenter, Mother, really she has given us most of the things that advocacy and gender equality. But I wanted to ask how do they really protect the women when it comes to quota? Like for us in South Sudan, we have 35% that women affirmative actions, and this one need a protection so that nobody can violate that. As a justice also, I need, looking forward, that how do you protect that rights so that we can learn from the experience sharing. Also, we heard from Rakib. She talked also a lot about the data disaggregation, and this is where the problem is. And really, as the South Sudanese, also women, we need really a support, technical support, so that this data disaggregation must be in place. Because without data, nothing can be done. No policy can get a guidance. No laws also can be initiated. Although our country here is struggling to have like a gender-based violence, anti-GBV bill, it is on pipe, and other also bills. But we need also to know from you how far you have gone into that. So and how did you get a support when it comes to data aggregation? When you look into the sexual assault, sexual harassment, whatever domestic violences, how did you access all this data and succeed in order to help? Also, I would like to give you also some shed I had about the Somali case, and the presenter Sagal. She talked about the women are not only seeing the seats that they are sitting in, but they're supposed to look beyond. I like that, because that moral policy giving a foundation of government, I think itself, it's very important for us as South Sudanese women also to get that information from her. And when it comes also to participation, the same things that you have taken, not we have to look beyond the elitism in becoming impact driven, where every woman and girls can feel the change. And this is all of us, we are looking forward. And the gap I have mentioned, I think the gap of the whatever violation and sexual harassment, domestic violence is happening to people with disability. How do we look into that in order to give them also their space in terms of protection? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Gada. You raise a number of critical questions, but I will request the speakers that have a response to respond to you at the very end, because we have a number of conversations that have been happening across the different countries. So we'd like to give opportunity to hear some of those, and then I'll come back to the speakers. So for the speakers on the call, please keep these questions and I'll give you an opportunity to respond to them. So if we can go to Wow, and if you can in 2 minutes summarize some of your conversations you had around this topic. Our speakers will come back to respond to all those questions that have been raised. And in the chat, there was a blog. We saw some links shared by some of the people that have joined this important conversation. Thank you so much. I will share this with panelists, with participants after the webinar. So Wow Hub, over to you. If Wow Hub is not ready, can we move to Mogadishu? Okay, over to you in Mogadishu. After Mogadishu, we'll be going.
Thank you, Laurie.
Okay.
We are ready.
Addis, please get ready. After Mogadishu, we are coming to Addis.
Hi everyone. I'm Samara Abdurrahman. I need to make summary of this topic today. The challenge we have. That topic is to evaluate women's role and the decision making. Peacebuilding for the process. And in Somalia, we have a lot of challenge. And women play critical role in shaping peaceful and justice in social. However, in Somalia, it is a post-conflictual country. Women participation in decision making, peace building, and remaining due to
The Somalians.
Social cultures. Focus on understand challenges and those challenges, identify effective and the solution, promote women inclusion, women empowerment, and leadership. The first challenge in Somalia is cultural and social barriers. Traditional gender role often limit women supporting and participating leadership in public decision making. Some community women are expecting focus on only women duties to reduce their visible and political place of the processing. Some women they don't have any educational capacity. Many women do not have access quality education and the leadership training. The limit of the political preparedness and the government's institution peace, community, and political parties. This is lack of the representative leadership of decision overlook women and the representative needs. The economic insufficient. The economic insufficient because of financial periods, and participant also full of in Spain and negative and negotiations, insecurity of gender-based violence, conflict or the governance threatening description of the violence against the discourage from the engagement of the political and political lives. Purpose of the solution. We need to promote gender equality and the political laws. Governance and instruction should be a deported law, and political peace and political leadership and peace building such as gender equality and measurement. This of educational capacity building, strengthening women association education and the leadership training. Leadership role of the conflict and the effectiveness. The community awareness, cultures, and engagement. Main community, elder richness, and discussing about gender equality can change for the negative attitude to the positive woman participation. Economic and environmental support, woman empowerment and progressive and opportunity to give them reason and needs to be participant and peace building to space. Promote encouragement and safety woman leadership activity and activity through the protection and the community support, encouragement, and the environmental peace process. This conclusion, woman role decision making and peace building, it's not only matters to fairness, but also found sustainable peace development with the woman practice and a meaningful peace and a creative at longer governance becomes the inclusive of the civil societies. Organization and the international partners must be work together to remove the barriers and promote the woman equal participant all the levels of the decision making.
All right, thank you so much, Mogadishu. Thank you so much for that contribution to the conversation and sharing the challenges that are experienced when it comes to this particular theme and topic. So let's move to Addis. If you can share some of your reflections based on the presentation and also the work you're doing in Addis Ababa and across Ethiopia.
Thank you, Lauren and SIHA, for organizing such event and organizing us to talk about such an important issue. We had the chance to discuss a few key points before before the beginning of this session. So we talked about main barriers that Ethiopian women face in decision making and peace process, mainly in relation to religion and culture. We talked about how women are not decision makers in religion, and we talked about how the interpretation of religion is the main problem in hindering women to participate and become decision makers in both peace processes and political participation. We've raised important examples in relations to our core values, for example, in traditional or religious institutions, how the involvement of women is very limited. We talked about how the societal culture is patriarchal and women are given in a lower place in the society. They're also victimized. Their sexual reproductive health right is not respected or protected. And the fact that religion is male dominated. We've also talked about how community and system doesn't see women as peace beneficiary. Women are seen as peace beneficiary rather than peace actors or main participants in peace processes. Women campaigns are not funded, are not supported. Political parties do not base their ideas on gender issues. Even those women in the society are not supportive of that kind of idea. We've also talked about how we have to produce gender sensitive women, especially for those who are in leadership and who can be seen as exemplary women in parliament or in positions, how they should be gender sensitive. The fact that they are women does not mean or does not guarantee that those women have full knowledge, or we can't say that they are gender sensitive. And we've also talked about lack of economic empowerment. We've said that trying to enforce a legal right without economic empowerment is meaningless. And even for those economically empowered women, GBV is also a problem, but somehow it's easier to solve the problem in those groups of women that are economically empowered. So as Commissioner was explaining how informal gatherings are made behind bars and off working hours, we've said that those informal decision-making process have affected those women who are empowered to for their voices to be heard. We've also shared positive stories as to the positive experience that women have in the peace process, or where women were actively engaged in ending armed conflict, especially in the Benshangul area of Asosa. One of the members were sharing to us that they had a very dominant role in stopping armed conflict in that area. And in regards to positive stories or positive success stories with women peace builders, we've also noted that the narrative should always be controlled and the success should always be recorded and well documented. We've also talked about what should be done in terms of recommendation. We've said that ensuring that women involved in peace and advocacy should be kept safe. Their safety should come first. There's a trend that there's an attack where some group of women or a woman is trying to speak out for other women. She's always a point of attack in terms of be it digitally or physically. So we have to provide a safe environment for those women who are trying to speak up or who are trying to be a voice for those women. So we've also talked about legal reform. We've emphasized the need to have specialized law in terms of combating GBV by recognizing the unique nature of gender-based violence. So we have discussed that we need a special law that tries to encompass, starting from the definition of GBV, what kind of evidence, who should interrogate, who should investigate, in establishing specialized courts, establishing specialized investigations. And we talked about legal reform. And we've also talked about standing in solidarity. This is very important. There might be instances where Ethiopian women are not able to speak up or have the opportunity to magnify their problem. So our sisters in South Sudan or our sisters in other Horn of Africa can be a voice for us in terms of different issues. And we've also talked about commitment from the government side. We have stressed that there needs to be a high level of commitment from the government side in order to address all these issues at hand. If there is anything I left, anyone can jump in. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Thank you for those insights and a lot of the reflections coming from Addis Ababa were responded to by our speakers. So I have been informed we have one question from Arua, we have one question from WOW in South Sudan, and then we have a representative of the Speaker of Parliament in South Sudan. You'll be the last person before we come back to our panelists. So the one person in Arua with a question, it's only one, and I'm sorry we can't take more than one. Please go ahead, Arua, with your question and address it to the panelists.
Thank you very much. Can you get me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. My question goes directly to Somalia because there was one speaker who said that women should never wait to be called for leadership or for something else. So now my question is, how effective is women involvement in decision making and peace, despite of all the challenges that women are going through? How sure is it that they work on and make sure that the women participate effectively in this? Okay, I'm by name Loksan Simon, a student of Arua Public Secondary School in Arua. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Simon. It's good to have young people in spaces like this. We'll move on to WOW in South Sudan. Please go ahead with your question.
Sorry for this disturbance. Actually, I'm called Joseph Anthony Angoto, a doctor from the University of Bara as well. I am very pleased by the smart presentation that has been presented. My question goes straight to the former Justice Ethiopia. She has narrated very important presentation about the allocations. She mentioned something about Namibia, about 50% allocation, followed by Somalia, 30%. But I've never come across what is the exact allocations when she was the justice, and then actually regarding the allocations, the percentage, what was the exact representation percentage allocated during her time, and then the challenges that actually she encountered. Then the other question also go to Hala. She was speaking about that women should come together informally so they can be able to influence. And if we take the case of South Sudan, actually most of these women, they came through their political parties. So what is the mechanism put forward whereby they can be able to influence the government in terms of actually this allocation to be allocated, and then women can be able to influence. But because most of the women are not from political parties. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for those questions from WOW in South Sudan. We'll move on to Juba, still in South Sudan. We have a representative of the Speaker of Parliament. So over to you in Juba.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
In Juba, we can hear background noise.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to recognize the role that SIHA is doing, and I'm happy here to come and represent the Speaker of the Transitional Legislative Assembly of the Republic of South Sudan. And also I recognize my colleague, honorable members in the TNL, and also honorable members, maybe chairpersons in the Central Equatorial States, and also those from Somalia and Uganda, Arua, and also Ethiopia, and whoever I miss, I recognize. First of all, I think as I'm talking here on behalf of the Speaker, of the Transitional National Legislative Assembly in this very important topic that talking about elevating women's roles in decision-making and peace-building processes. Coming into our mind that whatever we are passed through as the South Sudanese, also women, and the Horn of Africa. So today, roles of the women, it's really when you look into our own context in South Sudan, we have changed from the traditional aspects that we don't have a space even to talk or to express our mind. Just only it was within the community context, women can be referred to be given a space to talk. But all in all, previously we don't have it, but now the Republic of South Sudan, since the independence of 2011, we have got our share as women, and now you can get the 35% affirmative action that gave our women in South Sudan a big space. And the space you can see, even the Speaker of the National Transitional Legislative Assembly is a female, and this is where we are. Previously, no woman can take that position in the Legislative Assembly. Also, we have gone far to see under, the air access and also the amended constitution that we have after the conflict of 2016, we came with the agreement in 2018 that also gave another power to women. And we have seen, we have our presidents is a male, and also we have 4 vice presidents. Among them, we have 2 female. Now they are vice presidents. When you look into also our parliament, you will get also the 35% is implemented, but somehow it is not fully implemented. When you look into also the executive, women participation, it is still, crawling within the 22% to 23% women representation in the executive in the Republic of South Sudan. And I would like also to give also some views upon the sexual violation that is always happening. And in line with the presenter, the justice who presented, some issues that relevant to laws that governing in our own context, when you look into the decision making itself, it's really challenging. Because when you look, for example, into the judiciary, our female, even if they're there, but they have not fulfilled the real representation that we are seeing and looking forward. But the women of South Sudan also, they have looked forward previously, trying, to look into the penal code, where if rape happened, for example, because the definition of rape, women can be raped, under, in the age 18 above. But also leaving that, behind, talking about the child defilement, that under 18, and this one, it is not tackled even in our penal codes. And I'm sure in other penal codes of other countries, this penal and the penal code that should give also a punishment for those they defile, our own children. And this is, by the way, need a lot of concern, and I need also sharing experiences from all the presenters that how they have handled that things. And when you look also the definition of the rape itself, we have a lot of definition that, again, it's a violence against women, it's a violence against men, because it's a gender violence sometimes. Always we are talking women, because always women are vulnerable to men. But sometimes it's happening to men. And you look into that definition, it's an act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, mental harm. And I like what the definition that defined in Israel, they have, quoted rape
is a terrorist act. I like that definition, and I also wanted to share with you that rape, it's a terrorist act that really always women are vulnerable with. We need also to work on. The definition of gender-based violence, it has a lot of aspects that really we are looking forward as women to have many definitions so that people should understand in lining. So when you look also into the conflict prevention or peace building that always we are yielding to see, our country, South Sudan, has passed through a lot of conflict beginning during the liberations, 21 years, until 2005, we came with a peace agreement, a comprehensive peace agreement that, signed. And then we have come into another, conflict in 2013 after we got our independence in 2011, 2016, where we come with the last agreement in 2018. So this agreement ensured many things, including, safeguarding some protection for women. But when you look into the context of the peace building itself, still we need a lot of support into that context so that we achieve and we enter into that through the conflict prevention so that we cannot go again. Another also, the conflict resolution itself, we haven't also set and the agreement, the resolution in the Republic of South Sudan, that talking about the legislation reform, and we have gone far, and we have entered into the Police Act. It's amended. Security also, it has been amended Act, and also we have some bills that we are happy to see it because also protecting our survivors, of rape. We have the reparation and the compensation bill that already enacted into law, and we have also truth healing commission already set it up, and this I can see South Sudan really has achieved in that part as far as women and also the gender concern when it comes to protection of the human rights. So look into you have to us. That one, I think, will cater into the transitional justice. And in the transitional justice, what I've mentioned, the two, I think, bill that really looking forward to protect our women and also compensate. Security, we can see involvement of our women in peace negotiation, and it happens before the peace agreement of 2005, and also the inclusion of women, and really they have done their parts, and we appreciate the role that our women in our country, they have done in order to achieve the peace that we have. Although it is a relative peace, we haven't reached into the fruitful peace that really we are looking forward. Also, as well, the women roles in decision making. Yes, there are many points also raised by the presenters. Women's suppose beside that our coming to represent our parties within the political arena, also we look forward to see that women selected also based on merits, and these merits sometimes when you look into it, it's a very serious matter that really will allow women to achieve whatever they want to achieve when it comes to unity, to unite themselves in one. Lastly, not least, also I've seen the question, also I can answer it in my own way, that how do we move women from informal influence to formal power, safety, and for impact or I can say value additional. So as far as the gender-based concern, also we have the capacity building. That is a way to capacitate our women and also to network. As we have assembled here through SIHA today, we have seen this connection must take place. So the advocacy and the awareness, we need to advocate for our women. And also when you see also the other aspect, also supporting policies, we need to have good policies that will protect women. When you look into the women empowerment economically, you can see women up to now in the rural can't even afford to own land in the homes. When you get there, it is very difficult also to protect their ownership of lands. And lands, it is another way of also empowering women economically in order to have to cultivate, to farm, to do whatever that they can do. Also addressing a socio-cultural barriers that it is happening, and we cannot deny that. You can see it in South Sudan, you can see it in Somalia and other areas. That is still, it is stagnating. So beside that, also the inclusive decision-making process. I feel also it is important, to have this inclusivity, responsive women. This all needs, all of us concerned, so that we come together as women. And I'm happy that to be with you here, and I really appreciate the role of SIHA do. And also I'm encouraging that we move forward also to replicate this event all over, so that we connect, share, and our experience, and also we benefit a lot. And I benefit a lot, and I admit that, and I thank everybody who participate here, and also I appreciate everybody here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable. And yes, we can send you all virtual hands. Thank you so much for representing the Speaker of the Transitional National Assembly of South Sudan. And thank you for correcting me, not yet Parliament, Transitional Assembly. I've taken note of that. So there've been a number of questions that have been responded to in the chat, but I would like to now invite Rakeb. If there is any question that hasn't been responded to, you have the floor, and please give your concluding remarks.
All right. I think there was a question on disability. So in my presentation, when I was talking about inclusion, I also included disability into that. So for that, in the commission that I used to represent, we had a commissioner which was assigned for disability inclusion. We also had a department specifically working on disability, but also ensuring that disability inclusion was mainstreamed in all our operations. So while doing that, we had a disability inclusion guide that gave direction to all departments, because we should not assume that people understand how to include disability in their operation, but also in programs. We also had to revise the human resource manual to encourage people, candidates with disability, to apply to our vacancies, but also to provide a conducive environment within the office, so that everything is accessible, but also additional reasonable accommodation is provided for our staff, but also beneficiaries that come to our office to get our services. We also, when we did the disability inclusion audit, we worked with an organization, or a disability organization, because as you know, there's this saying that says, nothing about us without us. So we really engaged them in the process so that they can lead us how we can really make our office, but also our operation disability friendly. And we kept working with civil society organizations that work on disability to continue the discussion, to really assess what is missing and address to strategy. There was one question about data disaggregation and how we got the technical support. So initially, when we started the reform, there was no data. And I remember that I asked them, if there are no women coming to seek our services, does that mean there are no human rights violations against women? Because if no one is coming to us, can we assume that no one is being abused, no one is being harassed, or her human rights being violated? And that's how we started to ask why women were not coming to seek our services. And that's how we started to promote our services. We had to go to organization working with civil society organization, services that women sought, the one-stop center for gender-based violence, victims, support, etc., so that they know they can also come to our office to get the services. Again, we had to work with civil society organization working with women and girls, and we kept on conducting monitoring to understand where the gaps are so that we can have a really evidence-based strategies to address the problem. As I mentioned earlier on, each and every department, even the departments that seemingly do not really have gender activities, had to report with aggregated data, and through that we were able to identify the gaps and address it. So, and if repeated recommendations were not considered, they were held accountable. So we really made the review process every quarter, and our biannual annual review process really looked into this and act upon it whenever we identify the problems. On women's representation, there was another question that I saw, I think it was on the chat, about when there are no, how can we bring women into position? As I mentioned during my presentation, we really headhunted for women leaders. So we really looked for women leaders and offered them the position, but also in categories of work where we couldn't find qualified women, we hired junior women, into junior roles, and then provided development programs, capacity programs to really enhance their competence. And whenever there are vacant positions, then obviously they will be promoted to those positions. So we were able to create a pipeline of future leaders through these development packages we were offering to junior women with potentials. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Any final remarks? Yes.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, this was really rushed. I had to really summarize my points. And as you can imagine, gender mainstreaming and inclusion is not a one-off kind of thing. And it will not be summarized into 10 minutes presentation or discussion. So I hope this discussion will continue, this dialogue will continue. I'm open to answer any questions, even in the future, if you would like that to happen. But keep up with the discussion and dialogue, because this is just the beginning, and there will be additional issues, challenges as we go along. But I think thank you very much for this dialogue, and I hope it will continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. You've spoken on behalf of the other panelists. Unfortunately, we have run over time by 15 minutes, and Justice Meza, Hala, and Sagal had to drop off the call. But if you still have any questions, please send them to info@sihanet.org. We also want to hear from you how you felt this webinar went, and also to inform content for our last webinar of this series. This has been the 6th in 7 webinars. So on your screen, you're going to see a QR code or a link for a survey. Please do take that survey. But as it's coming up, could we take a group photo to remember this moment? If you can turn your videos on wherever you are, please turn your videos on, and let's have a big smile, because it has been an amazing conversation this afternoon. So I'll just ask the SIHA team to give me a cue when the Photos have been taken so that we have the feedback session. One more minute. So just checking with tech, are we done with the photo? So I've been told 30 seconds. So for those of you who can turn your videos on, please do. Okay, I'm going to request that the link to the link to the feedback survey comes up, the QR code comes up. And as that is coming, I just want to say a hearty thank you to all our panelists. And thank you to everyone that has joined from the hubs, from online, across the Horn of Africa region and beyond. As we wrap up, I just want to say that the structure and political barriers that we face, we have had over real, but so are the pathways and institutional hooks that work. They've been shared with us. So now we have to carry these tools and inspiration to bring this into our spheres of influence. And let's continue to ask ourselves a question. What will I do differently tomorrow? What measurable shift will I aim for? So we invite you to stay connected and continue this conversation beyond this space. And I hope that this webinar has been an inspiration and will continue to, inform and help us reflect as we challenge ourselves around the theme. And this theme was entitled From the Margins to the Forefront, Elevating Women's Roles in Decision Making and Peace Building. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.